An성gi died on January 5th, just a few days ago. So this is my attempt to make a thank you, a tribute to An성gi. Great actor. 안녕하세요. This is Mark Peters with the Frog Outside the Well Research Center. And today, you see, we've got two new friends. This is Quincy Rasband.
Yes, I'm a student at BYU studying Korean history.
And this is Hunter Gillette.
I lived in Korea for 2 years, and I love learning more about Korea.
You're a Korean major?
So I'm actually a psychology major at the moment,
major,
but I was studying music, but I'm also considering the Korea.
You do a lot of music.
Yes, I do.
and you like Korean music.
Oh, I love Korean music, yeah.
And we saw interesting music in this movie.
Right.
Today, what I want to talk about is a movie that came out in 1996. And the movie was called 축제', which means festival. But it was a weird kind of festival.
Definitely.
Right?
Yeah.
The festival was a funeral. And it's about a funeral. And it starred Jung-hae. Do you know her?
This was my first time seeing a film with her.
Okay. She came on the scene when she was 20 years old in 1994, 2 years before 축제'. She came on as a pansori singer, a young pansori singer. Sopyeonje means the Western pansori tradition. Western meaning Jeolla-do,
Yeah.
Southwest. And here you see this movie shot. She plays the role of a blind pansori singer whose father was crazy. And literally crazy. And anyway, it's a very interesting movie. It was a big hit. And another movie that she was in, An성gi was also in. An성gi is our other hero, and that was called Tebek Sanmek. And here's an An성gi image. There's Jung-hae. She plays the role of a shaman in Tebek Sanmek.
Interesting.
And here she is there. She's a shaman, and here are a couple of screenshots with her. And she does a shaman ceremony toward the end of the movie. So she's a great actress in Korea today. I met her one time.
Really?
Oh, really?
Yeah, we were on a program together. She was the MC and sang and did things. And I was one of 6-7 speakers that spoke at the program. So I got to meet her.
Wow.
And I told her that I really loved Tebek Sanmek and Sopyeonje and 축제'. She said, "Oh, you like 축제' because that's not as well known." And I said, "I love 축제'. I use it in my class. It has so much culture." And she said, "Yes, it does." And when I said, "I just really love your work," she was so humble and sweet. You know, you think movie stars are full of it sometimes. But thank you. You know, very, very nice. So I really like her a lot, and I like her work, and she's really good in this movie.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Although she plays a real
Character.
Yeah.
character, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to talk about 축제' today, and it's festival, and you see them all dressed up in their mourning clothes, and yet they're laughing.
Right.
This isn't right.
Uh-huh.
You know, there's something wrong about this.
Yeah.
If you look this up on IMDb as a movie, it classifies it as a comedy.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Kind of makes sense.
Yeah, and there is some hidden comedy in there that I don't think you guys even got.
Okay.
You know, there's some really subtle poking fun of Korean things that you have to almost be inside of Korea to understand why they're making fun of it.
Definitely.
And we'll talk about that just a little bit. But you saw some of the humor is obvious.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is really, really subtle, clever kind of humor. So it's an interesting setup that here, this mourning situation, these mourners, all in the old mourning garb, are laughing. And that's the way the movie ends, as you know.
Right.
It starts out with Lee Jun-sup is our hero. He's a writer, living in Seoul, successful writer, just has won awards and such. And he's got word that his mother has died down in Jeolla-do. And he says to his wife, this is one of the funny parts, he says to his wife, "Go to the bank and get some money." Do you remember what she says?
How much should I
How
pull
much?
out?
Yeah, and what does he say?
All of it.
All of it!
Take it all.
and he says, "People are depending on us." And that is so funny. You know, I mean, her question is reasonable. You know, how much should we take?
Right.
Definitely.
All of it. You don't say that, you know. And yet that's what they did. And so they're on their way down south. They don't say they're going to Jeolla-do, but you know it's Jeolla-do from two big clues. One of them here is on the freeway when it splits.
Right.
And
I noticed when that happened.
Did you notice
yeah,
that?
I was like, I know where that is.
That was a clever little way of saying
Yeah.
we're going down to Jeolla-do.
Yeah.
That was one hint. The other big hint, Of course, it's on the coast, but you know the Gyeongsang-do can be on the coast. The other thing is the accent.
Yes.
Right.
Did you notice that
Oh
accent?
yeah. There was a couple characters for sure. I was like, oh yeah, this is definitely.
Yeah, we're definitely in Jeolla-do.
Yeah.
So that was a fun part of the movie. Okay, they're on their way down, and the father, Jun-sup, says to Eun-ji, you know where we're going, you know what we're doing. And what do you think about that? And Eun-ji says, I should be sad, but I'm not. Because she doesn't really know her grandmother and doesn't know how to relate to this. And this is a very important seed that's planted that we see the results of later on, and that is the book that,
Definitely.
that he makes for her so she could understand the funeral and the death. There are a couple of figures that come out. On the right here is Miss Chang, and she's the reporter, the obnoxious reporter. What's his reaction to her?
Oh, I can't remember.
It's coquettish. She's coquettish. It's cutesy.
Yeah.
Right.
There's something funny going on. And there's one scene
Definitely.
where the mother, did you notice the one scene where the wife looks over like,
Yeah.
She was staring at her for sure.
is that the other woman, you know?
Definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you
It was
saw that.
definitely inferred.
And then the other interesting character appears amidst the chaos of the funeral, and she stands there for a long time, and nobody pays attention to her. And if you go back and look closely, when Jun-sup sees her, he ignores her several times, and then finally comes over and realizes who she is. And this cousin and this auntie, also, when they walk by, they look at her and just go on. They don't realize this is their niece and cousin and family member, because she is all dressed up, you know.
Yeah.
She's different from everyone else.
Definitely.
This scene with Yong-sun and Miss Chang at a restaurant is a little bit interesting because she sings. Why would she be singing? Why did they put that in the movie? Well, she's the Sopyeonjae person, and she sings in Tebek Sanmek. Im Gwon-taek knows she's a singer, and I don't know who arranged that. If Im Gwon-taek says, hey, we got to do a song for you, or if she said, my contract says I need to do a song to perpetuate my image. I don't know, but she sang that one song in the restaurant, which was sort of incongruous, wasn't it? It sort of didn't fit. Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the story for that. She is the singer, and they're honoring her by giving her that for her role.
Gotcha.
Now, as it's going along, you suddenly go to these fakey scenes that are all pastel.
Yeah.
And the music is what?
It's a dongyo song.
Very soft, sweet music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you first see this, what's going on with this, right?
Definitely.
You find out what it is later.
Right.
But it just happens, it's really strange. And it always happens at a emotionally critical point of the movie. This scene, he's weeping because he's seeing them dancing and singing the last funeral song. And he's just watching them, and it just comes to him. And at several other points when the emotion is so intense, it jumps to the fakey children's scene. And in the children's scene, they're talking about the death of the grandmother. Yeah. And they talk about the idea that she's giving her life to Eun-ji, to the little girl. Yeah. And as Eun-ji is growing, grandmother is shrinking. And it's a very interesting idea. And then it says, people who have done well in their lifetime will be born again. Very, very Buddhist.
Definitely.
This movie at the outset is very Confucian because it's a Confucian ceremony, but it's loaded with Buddhism.
I was going to ask about that because I caught on to there's a lot of different influences from the two.
Look back at this scene here. What are they chanting as they're going around?
Gwanam Bosar.
And this is misspelled. It's Gwanam Posal. But who is Gwanam Posal?
Is it the Buddha or Bodhisattva of compassion?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And in Buddhism, it might be hard to get to the Buddha, so you go through a bodhisattva that can help you get there. And Gwanam Posal is the best of the bodhisattvas to go through. So it's interesting that there's so much Confucianism and so much Buddhism in this thing. And that's one thing I liked about it. It's just loaded with culture, loaded with all kinds of culture. So Eun-ji finally figures out something about her grandmother dying, and she says it filled her with great sadness. So we achieved our objective. That Eun-ji was supposed to be sad, but she didn't know how to do it. And now she's appreciating the sadness of losing her grandmother. In that regard, this movie is 3 movies. There's the mainline story.
Yeah.
There's the children's book
Right.
of the funny little pastel scenes.
Yeah.
But there's also the anthropological study.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you can tell that's on because it puts the hanja right out there. And here's one of the first ones, and I didn't know about this one, is holding the clothes up and shouting from the roof 3 times that grandma has died and call her name and that she has died. That was one thing. Another one here is what to do about the setting before you take the casket out. I really like these things because it's a great anthropological study of a funeral, how the funeral is supposed to take place.
Yeah.
And I've thought they ought to take all those out and you've got an anthropological movie, a short for anthropology. Well, somebody did it.
Really?
Yeah. And I think there are 27 of these, if I remember right. I've gone through and looked at each one of them. I think there are 27 of these steps of the funeral. Well, somebody did it, and it was on YouTube for a while.
Oh.
And then the
Then got
company said, it's copyright, and then they took it down. But someone else had the same idea that I did. This is a great anthropological study. So it's really 3 movies in one is the way I look at the movie.
Yeah. I was also wondering, with the anthropological stuff, is that pretty accurate to a Joseon style funeral?
Yes. And I think for most of these people would think that this was the way it's been done for 1,000 years. It probably hasn't. Things change over time. But it's probably something that's been done well through the Joseon dynasty.
Yeah.
But the thing about today is this is dying. You can't do all of this.
Right.
Yeah.
And all sorts of rituals, especially these days, get shortened. The Cheolla that people do in their homes and at the graveside used to be a big elaborate thing. It's getting simpler and simpler and simpler as you go along today. So, the anthropology was really interesting. Now, it's funny. Here are the losers, these loser riders, these jokesters that are nothing but trouble. They're often drinking and gambling, and they've been called down to be the pallbearers, right?
Yeah.
They're out fishing one day, and they say the whole point of the movie on this fishing boat. Did you catch that?
Yes.
What's it about?
It's about filial piety and almost a critique on today's
Exactly.
filial piety.
And the question is always asked in Korea, is Confucianism a religion? And the standard answer is no, it's not. But it really is. So when is it and why is it? And these guys say the answer, and that is when you're at a funeral. The funeral is the apogee of Confucian ceremonies, and then it's followed up later on with the ancestor ceremonies on a yearly basis. And so here he says, once they're dead, filial duty becomes more of a religion. And another one he says here is, nothing is more grand and sincere than filial piety. Filial piety, as I understand it, is the duty of children to learn to obey their parents. But the way Koreans use hyo these days is showing respect to the old people. And that's what they're talking about here. Filial piety is having a nice funeral in the ancestor ceremonies. So these drunk fishermen are the ones that talk about what Confucianism really is. So a lot of Confucianism, a lot of Buddhism in this movie.
Definitely.
Yeah.
How do you feel like that theme kind of relates to nowadays? Do you think it's still very prominent and an issue going on?
Confucianism is weakening and weakening by the day. I've been shocked in my YouTube channel to see the comments people send in. They're very, very critical of Confucianism. Of course, it's not uniform. You have a lot of people that are very religiously committed to Confucianism. But I get a lot of criticism, especially from females, because of the oppressive nature that Confucianism has evolved into in really in more recent times. Originally, years and years and years ago, it wasn't that bad at all. Okay. Another thing about the funeral is here they call in a feng shui expert. And do you know the feng shui?
Yeah, kind of where to bury someone, what direction to face them.
What's the word for it in Korean?
Oh, I can't remember.
Feng shui. Feng shui. Feng shui is Chinese.
Yeah.
So they translated it here into English, Chinese. But so they have the feng shui person. They also hired a professional singer to come in. And what happened to him?
He got
Got
drunk.
very drunk.
Blacked out. That was pretty funny.
That was funny. And he
Yeah.
couldn't do the singing, so the village idiot does the singing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the women say, "Oh, he's doing a good job."
Yeah.
I never thought he could do it. So that's part of the humorous shtick in the movie. Here's another part. I captured this screen. The women are so overdone by all of the cooking they've got to do, and that's the bad thing about Confucianism is the men do the ceremonies and the women are in the kitchen, and all that food. That was one of the. It's really kind of funny that and someone is saying, "Who's going to eat all this food?" Not realizing that the writer has invited in so many people.
Yeah.
But here it's funny. How could you not tell the difference between sugar and salt? One of the cooks messed up the recipe and made it sweet when it should be salty, or vice versa. So there's a lot of humor in this thing. One of the humorous parts is this is the Cheolla, the graveside Cheolla that Yong-sun sets out for her father. Where's her mother?
She was a prostitute.
Yeah.
She doesn't know.
We don't know if she's a prostitute or not. She calls her a prostitute.
Right,
but,
that's what it was. Yeah.
a bar girl apparently, and maybe was a prostitute. Anyway, no connection with the mother.
Right.
What does the father say about the mother?
Oh, I can't remember.
He shows a picture to Yong-sun when she's a little girl in one of the flashbacks. Said, "Here's your mother. If I ever saw her again, I'd break her legs." So the resentment and such about this family. And so poor Yong-sun is a product of all this. So no wonder when she shows up, she's an outsider. And she yells one time, "You treated me like a slave, and I did all this work, and I loved Grandma," etc. So here she's setting out the Cheolla for her father since she's here in town. And what is it? Snicker bars, cognac whiskey, grapefruit,
jerky.
and jerky.
Right.
All these weird things. I mean, it is so funny. She says, "Dad, sorry I'm late." One thing about the Cheolla is it's just a guilt trip all the time. You just can't do it adequately. And so she's realizing that. At the end of the movie, I love this scene. She's up on the hill, and one of the uncles, Jun-sup, says, go call Yong-sun. And she's up on the hill just all by herself, lonely. And he says, "Uncle wants you." And so she comes down the hill slowly, and then she just starts running in. And she has the enthusiasm of a child. It's so beautiful to see this. And this leads to what I think of the atonement of the movie, a resolution of love and compassion and understanding after all, which shows up in the picture at the end.
Yep.
And she comes in and very respectfully stands there like, "What do I do?" And he motions to come across, and she goes across and sits on the outside, and one of the cousins reaches over. It makes me want to cry. It's so tender, it's so beautiful.
It is.
Cousin reaches over and says, "Come on inside here." And so that's where the movie ends. And that scene, of course, is the scene for all of the publication and all of that sort of stuff. And it was done by Im Gwon-taek, who's one of the great movie producers. He also did Sopyeon-jae and also did Chunhyang, which is a great retelling of the famous Chunhyang story. You know the Chunhyang story?
A little bit.
No, not much.
We gotta learn this. It's one of the major folk stories. It's the faithful wife story. Okay, so anyway, Im Gwon-taek has made a lot of great movies, and it's really interesting. So the question is, why are we looking at this movie today? So what? Why today? Do you have any ideas?
Well, recently An성gi를 had passed away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. An성gi를 died on January 5th, just a few days ago. So this is my attempt to make a thank you, a tribute to An성gi를. Great actor. Was in a lot of really great movies. I haven't seen them all. I'm not Joe Movie. I'm not a specialist on movies, but the ones I like. And he's really been in a lot of good movies. His funeral was at the Myeongdong Cathedral.
Wow.
Downtown.
Yeah.
Big thing. And see the people that are carrying the award. He was given a medal like the one I got earlier this year. His was first class, mine's third class. So I'm a third class kind of guy, and he's a first class kind of guy. And so it's two famous movie actors. Lee Jung-jae
Yeah.
Yes.
from
Squid Game.
Squid
Yes.
Game. And I don't know Chung Woo-sung so well. Sorry, they're going to hate me for that, but I don't know. Anyway, two prominent movie actors led the procession. And found in the audience, there's Im Gwon-taek. He's alive. He's 91 years old.
Wow.
And he just very quietly got his hat on, just quietly attending the movie. So that's my tribute to An성gi. Great actor. A bit younger than I, but you never know when you're going to go. So that's my take on it. And that's why I love this movie. It's just loaded with fun cultural things.
Definitely.
And it's funny.
Yes, it was very enjoyable to watch. Like, it wasn't hard. Like, there's all these cultural things that are put into the movie, but I still enjoyed learning it about. It was presented in a way that was very cohesive.
What did you think about the fake pastel sequences? And we finally resolve it in the end by finding out that was the book he was writing for Unji.
Yeah.
And that book not only was healing for Unji, it was healing for Yong-sun. Because Yong-sun is given the book, and she looks at it and closes the book, and there's a quiet scene on her for a long, long time, and then she starts to cry. And what that is saying is, I really realize my uncle, he may have been mean to me, but he had his reasons, and I should forgive him too. He's a good man. So I see a lot of atonement, of resolution in the movie on a family sense. And that's what funerals do. Sometimes they exacerbate relationships.
Right.
They bring two cousins together that did business and one cheated the other, and But a lot of times funerals are great occasions for healing, and that's what I saw in this movie. What other questions do you have?
I'm wondering, with Young-soon, when she did the chase-on, brought the stuff for her father and for the grandma, why do you think she brought the Western American products?
I suppose because she's a jerk and doesn't know any better. But I suppose that Im Gwon-taek is sort of making fun of what the Chesa's about, that it's different things to different people.
Definitely.
And to a woman like Young-soon, that's the best she could do. So, it was funny, but I think it was not making fun of her so much as asking the question of what is the Chesa.
Yeah.
I think, yeah. So that was really interesting.
It was. I have one question that I've been wondering about for
Okay.
quite a long time.
Okay.
At the end of the film, in one of those pastel-y scenes, the grandma passed away, and then they showed the white butterfly flying off in the distance.
I don't know how universal a representation that is. You saw it some other place too?
I've seen it in other Korean films, like Ode to My Father, Gukjae Shijang.
Oh, was that in there?
Yeah. The father that had passed away is also represented by the white butterfly.
Oh,
so
interesting. Yeah.
I didn't know if there was a specific meaning to the butterfly.
I don't know
or
that
where
it's
it came
universal.
from.
I haven't heard that a lot, but it might just be movie shtick. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not a universal theme that I know about.
Mm-hmm.
And I know everything about Korea, but I don't know everything about Korea. There are all these mysteries of new things that you run into.
I did have a question about one of the funeral, one of the preparations for the burial. It was the sokgwing, the checking the last breath with a piece of cotton near the mouth and nose. I was wondering why they do that.
Oh, they do that all the time. Because when she's passed out and comes back again, one way of seeing if a person's really breathing or not, you can listen, and you can feel their chest, but maybe that's not clear. You put some cotton right here, and if it quivers, they're still breathing lightly.
Gotcha.
So that's one of the
sense.
it's one of the mortality checks.
Gotcha.
And then later you saw they stuffed cotton in her nose.
Yeah.
And they put food in her mouth, and that's typical. Food in the mouth for the journey. You're going to be going for a while. You should have some food.
It's much more of a practical answer than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. No, that's a very practical thing. And those 27 steps of the funeral were really, really interesting, I thought.
Definitely.
Let me say this. When I was an undergraduate, I was a double major in Asian Studies and Anthropology. And I remember one time my anthropology professor talking about funerals. And he says, in the old days, and in primitive societies, you do it. The family does it. And you don't hire some guy at the funeral home. Now we have the funeral home and the funeral director. It used to be the mortician. It used to be the undertaker. We gussy up the words with nice words because it's an uncomfortable thing. Yeah. But to hire someone to do the washing of the body and to prepare the body is alienation. it takes away from you the emotion that you should have to prepare your loved one for the burial. And so that was really tender about that, of how they showed all of the steps preparing the body for burial. Yeah. And I think my anthropology professor was right. We lose something by hiring out things that should be family things.
I agree.
So it was a great movie.
It was very good.
much so enjoyed it.
A lot of fun. So all y'all, it's on YouTube, so anyone can watch it. It has English subtitles to make your way through, which made it a lot easier for me and for you.
Oh yeah,
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you all, and thanks An성gi. This is my feeble attempt at a tribute to a great actor, who they say is a great human being as well. They say off camera he's really a nice guy. So thanks. We'll see y'all next time. Bye.
Thank you.